Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. I'm glad to have you all with us. I think we're going to wait just a couple more minutes for a few more people to log in, and then we'll get started. So hang tight, and we're just about ready to go. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started now. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Michael Henry. I'm head of U.S. Operations here for Test Rocker, and I want to welcome you all to our last Know It Owl series of the summer, Know It Owl series webinar of the summer, and that's to explain the new PSAT. So it's right around the corner. It's coming up in October, so we thought would be a good time to outline some of the changes, go through some practice questions, just so you can kind of see what changes are coming your way. So to start out, this is kind of what we're going to be doing. I'll tell you a little bit about Suniti, founder and the brains behind the Test Rocker operation here, and we'll walk through the format, give you a brief content breakdown, kind of give you an idea of what's going on with the new test and how things are changing. So what to kind of be aware of as far as the new PSAT goes. And then what I'll do is I'll pass it over to Suniti so that we can go through some practice questions and we can outline some of the things that we're talking about as far as things that you likely wouldn't have seen on the previous SAT or the current version of the SAT. So really trying to get you up to date and have you understand what you're up against with the new test. As we're going along, please feel free to ask any questions. You'll notice in your GoToWebinar control panel that there should be a little question box where you can type out a question, send it our way, and send them whenever you have them. I'll work on making sure that we can actually address them and get to them if it makes sense in the middle, and if not, we can wait to the end and address those questions. So don't be shy. I'm happy to take your questions. So first things first, who is Suniti? Suniti is our expert tutor. She's been teaching students for the SAT and ACT in a one-on-one capacity and through Test Rocker the last 3 years for over 15 years total. So she's very familiar with these exams and what test writers are really doing. Even with all of the changes, she's seen multiple changes of this magnitude before. So she understands where the test writers are coming from, what their goals are, what they're trying to do. So she's really knowledgeable. She's an amazing educator. And part of why we wanted to go through some specific questions, because this is what she's great at, is explaining really how to understand these questions and what the underlying concept or underlying idea is that you need to be aware of in order to tackle these things. So as you can see in this slide here, she's helped students increase their scores up to 700 points on the current SAT and 8 points on the ACT. She's prepared thousands of students around the world. She's, again, just very, very experienced with these particular tests, and she's a phenomenal resource. So again, back to the asking questions, always ask as many questions as you need to. So what does the new PSAT look like? So just some logistical things. This is really how the test is going to set up, and it will flow in this order. So you'll have your reading section first. There'll be 60 minutes. You'll have 4 single passages and 1 pair of passages with 47 total questions. An important thing to note here is they're all multiple choice. Same goes for writing. So this is good. This is a good thing, and this is something that students should be familiar with. They've seen multiple choice questions before, or multiple choice type tests before, so that part's not changing. With the writing, you'll notice it's also passage based. So we'll get into this in a little bit, but it's also going to be based on kind of in context learning, and you'll notice that that's a major theme as we work through the different sections. Then for the math sections, you'll notice that they're broken out into 2 different sections. So there's one section that's without your calculator and one section that's with your calculator. So that's important to note, and something that you don't want to get too comfortable and too reliant on your calculator, because there's going to be questions that you're going to run into that you have to answer without it. So even more stress, we would like to stress the importance of understanding those underlying concepts and being able to handle and manipulate various math topics and concepts with or without your calculator. The other thing to note here is that the math sections are also broken out into multiple choice and free response. So in each section, you see there that there's 4 free response questions. Those are going to be open-ended questions you need to fill in using the grid that they provide. They're all relatively simple answers. They can include decimal points. They can include fraction forward slashes, like you see here in the without calculator, so that you can create those fractions, you can create decimals. That's going to be something when you're filling out that particular part of the test, understanding that you need to fill in those appropriate bubbles where the signs should go. So something to take a look at ahead of time to make sure that you understand just exactly how to do that. All in all, the total time is going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes. You notice there's no essay section, and this is just about 20 minutes short of what an actual SAT, the full-length new version of the SAT, will look like. So there's 10 minutes taken off the reading section and 10 minutes taken off the math with calculator section. So it's almost the full thing, which is a little bit different than the old version of the test. It was a little bit shorter, and they're really trying to prepare you and get you familiar with what the new SAT is going to look like. So how is it scored? This is something that's a little bit different as well. With the old SAT, or the old PSAT, it was kind of in line with that 800 point per section scale. What they're doing and what we found in our research is that the way that they're going to score this PSAT is going to be out of a total score of 1520. Each section, the reading and writing, which is combined now, it's not separate scores, will be out of 760 points. And then the math with and without calculators will also be out of 760 points. So those extra points there, we didn't find a reason, or there wasn't a reason given that we could find that related to why that, or the method to that kind of madness. So what it really boils down to is it's more than likely just a shorter test, kind of what they're expecting to get out of you for the 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it's not going to be that full new SAT. So it's not exactly aligned. So there's some important scoring notes here to let everyone know about. First of all, guessing is no longer penalized. So that's really important. It's not negative marking anymore the way that it used to be. So if you were to take a full guess, that could really hurt your score because it actually brought your score down, your raw score down. That's been taken out. So you can guess and you should not leave any questions blank. That's an important new strategy to take, is that you really don't want to leave any questions blank anymore because it doesn't hurt you. The other piece of this is that there's less answer choices, specifically in the reading and writing sections, than there used to be. So your probability goes up, and this is even more reason why you shouldn't leave those questions blank. So guessing is no longer penalized, and that's really important. On the flip side, it is still a competitive test, and scaled scoring will still apply. It depends on how you do versus your peers on that day. So how you score and what your final score will be reflective of is not only how you did, but how everyone else did. So that raises the importance of understanding, okay, I need to do as well as I can, just because everyone else is out there doing the same thing. So the preparation and the importance of recognizing that it's not strictly how you're scoring, it's how everyone else around you is doing, kind of makes it where you want to have as many correct answers as possible. Okay, so let's go into the content a little bit. And what I'm going to do here is just give some highlights of the reading section, the writing section, and the math section to just explain some of the higher level important changes and things that might look different from what the previous SAT and previous PSAT look like. So first, in the reading section, we can't stress it enough that because these are all multiple choice questions in the reading section and there's no penalty for guessing, always put an answer down. And that's always going to be something that you want to do. Don't leave anything blank. So what are these passages? So if you remember, there's 4 passages on the reading section and 1 passage pair. So what are these passages going to be about? What the topics are contemporary US and world literature. So your standard literary passages that you're familiar with and kind of used to seeing on these standardized tests. History and social studies, again, there may have been some passages that related to this in the past, but not as dedicated or not as specific as what they're going to be on the new test. And then there's a new added piece to this, and that's science-based passages. So the reading itself is going to be elevated. You're going to need to have a greater ability to navigate through these passages, which will be a little bit denser than what they used to be. Another big piece of this is vocabulary. Vocabulary changes this time and with this new test, in the sense that the questions are more built around the context of the entire passage. So if you were not familiar with the previous vocabulary questions, you were given a sentence with a blank in it and answer choices, and you had to select the best choice for that sentence. That same idea is still being brought forward as far as the vocabulary goes, except it's also placed into a larger passage. So it's something that you have more context for what these words could mean or what the best word could be. So there is a heavy emphasis on within the context of the larger passage. So it's not the list is going to be different. It's going to be more in line with what the College Board has identified as words and with, I guess, words that are more relevant to today and things that you're doing today. So that's a big change, where it's not its own separate section like it used to be. Finally, there's passage analysis. So the analysis will depend on the topic. So as I've kind of illustrated here, the science passages can be paired with questions on hypotheses, experimentation, and data. So there's more, that's not your standard reading analysis question. That's also more along the lines of taking in data, taking in charts, and understanding what that data means to the larger passage. So that's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, and something that is meant to have that real world application and things that you will see as you move on into college. Then you have your standard literature passages that will be paired with questions focused on theme, mood, and characterization. That's more what you would associate the critical reading section with for the current SAT, the current PSAT. So those questions are still going to exist. You still need to understand tone, attitude of the author. It's just that they've changed and added to that initial base. So now you have to know more things and understand how to weed through all these new science passages and as well as some additional history and social studies passages. For the writing section, the questions are all going to be derived from the passages that are provided. So there were 4 passages in the writing section as well. And how those questions are going to work, it's not the way that it's changing is the questions will be identifying a piece of a sentence or an entire sentence within a passage and asking you a question about that next to the passage versus I'm just going to be answering grammar questions where I have this a standalone independent sentence that may or may not have an error in it, and then I answer that. These questions in the writing section are absolutely still grammar-based, and there's still a focus on grammar and rhetorical effectiveness, but what you will have to do is understand how they relate to the passage. So there are analysis questions as well. In that sense, it's very similar to the reading section. So there's going to be additional analysis and breaking down the actual context of the passages. And they'll throw in some more vocabulary questions and they'll mirror the way that they're asked in the reading section. So you're going to get some additional vocabulary work in the writing section as well. So really the writing section becomes almost an extension of the reading section with a little bit more focus on grammar. And finally, the math section. So this has been a common theme, the questions with more context. So the problems are going to be presented with more specific circumstances. You need to have an understanding of the mathematical skills and be able to break down how this context really affects what the question is asking. So providing you with a real life situation and essentially asking you to dissect it, break it down into really where the math and the conceptual understanding comes in and how to approach those questions. So there's a little bit more unpacking. It is more straightforward in the sense that there's not tricks and traps basically set up like the previous math sections would have been on the old PSAT. It is more straightforward, but there is a little bit more to unpack with what the context is. So and really that last point here is saying that they're overlapping the real world situations into the underlying concept. So putting you in that real life situation and then applying, this is where math comes in. So that's where you need to be familiar and be able to understand where those concepts actually apply. So even more than ever, the underlying conceptual knowledge is very, very important. Also, the addition of a no calculator versus a calculator section. This is something that is new, and it's probably not something that you do a lot in school. In your normal math classes, you're often allowed to use calculators. So having that safety blanket taken away in some cases can be a little unnerving, and it's something that you need to be prepared for and understand that this is going to be something that you're going to see. So don't neglect it. And finally, the free response questions. These questions, they make up a smaller percentage, but because they are there, again, it's not in the standard multiple choice, I'm going to put an answer down for everything. You can still put answers in, but they need to be more in line with what the question's asking. So free response questions obviously aren't as easy to guess on, and that's where that underlying conceptual knowledge will be important. As far as the content of the math section goes, there will be higher level math that will be presented in these tests. So there will be some trigonometry, some higher level algebra 2, and it's slightly more advanced than what the old PSAT was. So there is more extensive knowledge that will be needed for the new math sections. So I'm going to quit talking and I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor over to Suniti and let her kind of fill in all those holes that I probably left in the previous slides, but using some practice questions. So what she's going to do is walk through some of these practice questions from the various sections. And as she's going through them, again, please don't hesitate to ask a question or let us know if something's unclear. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor over to Suniti.
Hi everyone, this is Suniti and welcome to this very interesting session that Michael has been conducting, and I've been listening to him very carefully, and he has really highlighted the important points that the new PSAT is going to deal with. So I am now going to focus on some practice questions because Michael has already told you quite a few details about the changes and about what it's going to entail. So let's first look at the reading practice questions. So here is one. One basic change that you will see in the new reading section is the introduction of graphics, introduction of data and charts. And the reason that they have included these graphics and data and charts is that they want the students to become familiar with dealing with articles that as are presented in newspapers, in normal magazines, so that they're able to deal with the information provided in that format. So in other words, to put it in short, they have to grow up a little bit. And I think that's a good thing because students need to be aware of what is going on in the world. For that, they need to read newspapers, they need to read contemporary articles, and this will get them to become with it, as they put it. So let's take a look at one such question. As you look at the question, it looks overwhelming. So, oh, there's the data, there's some charts, but really, such questions every student can attempt because these are basically very general questions. They just look difficult. They don't really ask for very complicated solutions. So let's take a look at one such question here, and I'm going to just bring up the pen here so I can deal with this. So the question here is, if we have a chart here, and which statement best summarizes the information presented in the graph? So the important part is to understand the question clearly. Which statement, so we have statements here, best summarizes is the key word. If you miss this, you will select a wrong answer. So you have to read carefully. Summarizes the information presented in the graph. We see in the graph the information has been presented from 2005 right up to estimated to 2015. So we have to pretty much give the overall picture. My suggestion to students is, without reading all these wordy, complicated choices, understand the chart and find the summary. Make an answer in your head first. So what is the summary here? From 2005, this seems to be the trend. And this trend, all students know, is an exponential increase. So that is the summary. From 2000 to 2015, the expected rise is exponential. Now we have a ballpark picture in our mind. We should look for that choice. Eliminate quickly any choice that doesn't match ours. So we have A, far more people around the world own computers. Is this talking computers and cell phones today than in 2005? This has to be deleted immediately because the graph doesn't talk about owning computers. How much information? These are zettabytes in trillion gigabytes. This is the amount of information or volume of information exchanged, and the y-axis tells us about digital information created and shared. That's about how many people own computers. So we immediately rule out A. Do not delve more deeply into it. B, the number of people. So is the summary about the number of people sharing digital information has more than tripled since 2005. Is it talking about the number of people? No, it's talking about the volume of information exchanged. C, the volume of digital information, which is on the x-axis, information, not on the x-axis, it's on the y-axis. These are the years. So the volume is the key part of digital information created and shared has increased tremendously. Now, tremendously is quite synonymous with exponentially. So I'm going to keep an eye on this choice. D, the amount of digital information created and shared is likely to be almost. This is the trap choice. I'm going to write trap. Why is this a trap choice? Because this is one specific truth that has been highlighted in this chart, but it is not the sum. Looking for the summary and not just one highlight. So this fact, if we calculate, 2015 is 8 and here it's almost 0, so it is about 8 times. It's about, you know, about less than 1. So it's not exactly true, but it's true. So we are not looking for specific detail here. We are looking for a broader picture summarizing the whole chart. That is why D will get eliminated and my choice is confirmed to be C. This is a question all students do, so there's nothing to be scared of such questions. Now let's look at the second question. Also deals with the chart. Let's take a look. Let's understand the question first, because if you don't understand the question, you cannot answer it. Once again, it's dealing with the same chart, so here is an exponential rise. So that was the summary. Now, let's look at what we have here. According to the graph, which statement is true about the amount of digital information projected? So this is another important word, projected, to be created and shared globally in 2012. So we need to get used to highlighting important parts of the question, as I have done here. Statement, so one of these statements is true about the amount of digital information projected to be created and shared globally in 2012. So let's go to 2012. This is 2012. What's happening here? It's a steady rise. And here, if we read off the y-axis approximately, the reading is about, this is 2, this is 3, so this is about 2.5. So in 2012, the reading is about 2.5 information created and shared in sites. Let's take a look at the choices now that growth in digital information creation and sharing was projected to be wildly out of proportion to growth in 2011 and 2013. So if you look at 2011 and 2000, not wildly out of proportion. So students need to be able to draw such inferences. So it is consistent with this rising trend, not wildly out of proportion. That is why A is eliminated. B, the amount of digital information created and shared was projected to begin a new upward trend. Is there any new upward trend created here? No, it's quite in line with the exponential rise. So B is eliminated. C, the amount of digital information created and shared was projected to peak. Has it peaked? No. Increasing exponentially. So C is eliminated. Now here is a test-taking tip. We have eliminated 3 out of the 4 choices with certainty. Select D and move on. Don't worry about going into D. So that's a time because we are certain. If we were not certain, then we would go into it. Sometimes there are 2 similar, very close choices. And in that case, you do have to go into both the choices. But in this case, we are certain. I would choose D and just move on, save. It's important to not only save time, but also to preserve brain power, brain exhaustion. Because this kind of a test is competitive, it's highly stressful. You're supposed to be resilient. It's all about how you're going to survive this test. So these simple techniques make us better test takers. So I would select D and move on. But for now, let's take a look. The amount of digital information created and shared was projected to pass 2 zettabytes for the first time. So yes, before 2012, the information tells us that the level has been below 2. So this is the maximum. It hasn't touched 2. And for the first time, it has surpassed the 2 zettabytes mark. So true. This is our choice. So once again, common sense questions. We have to apply our mind. And that is what I like about such questions. It's forcing us to apply our minds. And with it, also get used to terminology that is being used. So wildly out of proportion, consistent with. So we are getting used to terminology that is used in everyday life. So I think this is a good idea. Now let's take a look at the next question. So question 3, this is also an example. So here, we have been talking about question 1 and 2. Sounds like a math problem, but that has been built into the reading section. You could also find data and analytics of data in the writing section. So those 2 questions that we just dealt with could be in the reading as well as in the writing section, depending on the passage. Now let us take a look at question 3. This is an important deviation from the old SAT. So here, we wanted to show you an example of a difficult type of question that you will see in the reading section. There is a reference to another question, so they can be layered, and they appear to require going back through the passage to read sections again, which is an important time concern. The question is, which choice provides the best evidence? So I'm going to highlight that. Provides the best evidence to be worded as in which of the following lines can we cite the best evidence to the previous question. So now we are talking about finding evidence for the previous. Here is a test taking tip. When you're answering the questions that are coming in pairs, so take a quick look at the question. Is there a citing question? Is there a question that's requiring evidence? In that case, when you're the first question of the question pair and you look for the answer, so also highlight. I'm going to write this quickly. Highlight. It's difficult to write with this pen, but I'm going to do my best. Highlight the so that you already have. I'm going to go back. So you already have the lines in place because you know that you might be asked for evidence. So just highlight the lines. 6. So I'm going to say in question 1, you put down the line. So line 36, that will already be written for you. You just go and highlight the lines, line 36 to, let's say, 40. Now where you found the answer to the previous question. So when you come to the second question, so now you have question 2, you will just read, is it 37 to 41? Probably. This is going to be, for example, if I had highlighted 36 to 40, then possibly and quickly answer such questions. So why you highlight? That way you will be able to answer. In the old SAT or the current SAT, which is going on till March next year, grammar was tested in sentences, but now in the new PSAT, which is a precursor to the new SAT March, new SAT 2016, what has happened is the writing section has changed in that the grammar is being tested as it was tested before, but now it is being tested in passages and not in individual sentences. So the sentence will be in a passage, so you do need to keep an eye on the context. So if the passage has been written in singular, you do need to be mindful of that. The verbs will be in singular, the pronoun will be singular, so on and so forth, and all the grammar rules that we have taught on Test Rocker will come in really handy. Let's take a look at one such question here. So we have, I'm going to get the pen. A few companies such as Google have even invested in high-tech nap pods that block out light. Play soothing music and gently wake. We have some verbs happening here. Block out light, play soothing music. So the underlined part should be gently wake nappers. So instead of waking, we need wake nappers. And now we have fixed it because if we know our grammar rules, we have to manage the parallelism here, keep everything in parallel. So we have gently wake, the answer choice is B. Not that hard to do once your grammar fundamentals and concepts are clear. So this is how it will be tested in the new PSAT. Let's look at another question. So once again, let me grab the pen. So this is taken from a larger passage. Employee naps might also lead to reduced healthcare costs for companies. Now it's the same context because it's the same passage continuing, and you have different parts that are underlined and numbered, and you need to answer. So now the passage goes on to say, employee naps might also lead to reduced healthcare costs for companies, since regular napping leads to long-term health benefits. So this is an important idea here, and it improves workers' average weekly attendance. The question here is, which choice provides a supporting example that reinforces the main point of the sentence? So the student now has to understand what is the main idea here. The main idea here is that napping, if the companies allow employees to nap, that leads to reduced healthcare costs for companies. And because the reason given is napping leads to long-term health benefits. So now I need to reinforce the main point with a supporting example. I've understood what I need to do. Let me look through the choices. Where is a supporting example for reduced healthcare costs? Including a lower risk of cardiovascular, so lower risk of cardiovascular problems such as heart attack or stroke. So this reinforces the main point. So that is why the choice here will be B. We definitely cannot say with no change. We have to say which are essential in an era. What is, which doesn't specify. In addition to make employees more efficient, that doesn't support or reinforce the main point. So that is why all these get eliminated. B is the answer here. Simple. We have to keep the context in mind. Another set of practice questions. Now let's look at the math. People are quite worried about the math because we've been hearing it's going to be different, it's going to be application-based, current situations, current context. So all that is a good thing, I feel. The only important part that I emphasize is students need to have a firm handle on concepts, a firm handle on fundamentals. They need to fix the gaps in their understanding. Once they do so, if they have a good grasp on arithmetic and number theory, if they have a good grasp on percentages, ratios, averages, number theory, then in algebra, they have a good grasp of how to do algebra, geometry, etc., all concepts in geometry. Why will they not be able to apply the concepts to real life situations? The only difference is we have to be ready for the context to be slightly different. The context is not going to be John had 3 marbles and Lisa had 5 marbles. So what is the probability of getting a red marble if 2 of Lisa's marbles were red and 3 of John's marbles? So that is familiar way of testing. That's what we learn in schools. Now they are saying in a certain game, a player can solve easy or hard puzzles. They're changing the context to suit everyday life. So that is a good thing, I feel. Students should be thinking about, if I had 5 computer games and you had 18 computer games, exactly. So that would be a different context to saying, if I had 5 marbles and you had 18 marbles. That is the only difference. So students will slowly need to get used to reading different kind of context. Let's take an example here. So here we have, in a certain game, a player, now as soon as I see, I'm just going to pause and just go off a little bit to give a test taking tip here. As soon as I see this question, I feel, oh, it's a really long question. I'm very short of time. I don't want to read it again and again. So as I read, I'm going to put down important points so that I don't have to go back and read. So I'm going to do that right here. In a certain game, a player can solve easy or hard puzzles. So I'm going to say easy or hard. A player earns 30 points for solving easy. So put E over 30 so you don't forget. So 30 points for easy puzzle and 60 points for solving a hard puzzle. So these are all points. Tina solved a total of 50 puzzles playing this game, earning 1950 points in all. How many hard puzzles did Tina solve? Now I have to realize my concepts need to be strong. I have two variables here, easy and hard. Normally we are used to X and Y, just alphabets. These are variables. The student has to understand I have two variables. I can solve this only if I have two equations. And as I have explained on Test Rocker, when we need two variables, we need two equations. One equation is going to be the quantity equation. So we have total number of puzzles are 50. So I will say E plus H equals to 50 puzzles. This is my first equation. And the second equation will be, so how many points? So we will have a total of 50. So E into 30. So we'll have 30E plus 60H should give me a total of 1950 points. So I have 1950 points. That's my second equation. That's the value equation. Now, another test taking tip. How many hard puzzles did Tina solve? In school, students are taught, eliminate, use elimination. Okay, so far so good. What should I eliminate? I should not eliminate something I'm looking for. I'm looking for H. So why should I eliminate H? I should eliminate E. So that's a test taking tip, a huge time saver. To eliminate E, I need to multiply everything with 30. Now here is a technique to save time. Just rewrite here. This is 30H. This becomes 1500. You don't have to rewrite both the equations. Now we have to change the signs. Students are taught this in school. Eliminate E, not H. You will get negative 30. Oh, there's a lag here. I seem to have lost that for some reason. So I'm going to quickly write that again. So we were at 30E plus, we had 30E plus 30H, I'm just recalling what we had, equals to 1500. That became equation 1, and the second equation remained what it was. So we had 30E plus 60H equals to 1950, and we were going to eliminate E. So we had eliminated E by changing the signs. Now we can say that negative 30H equals to negative 450. Therefore, H, because both sides are negative, we can convert them to pluses. So H, so here is the skill that the student will need. You have to be able to do these skills, these algebra skills. So H equals to 15, and that is what I needed to find. I needed to find how many hard puzzles. Eliminated the easy ones, and I solved for H. So quite a few skills involved here, quite a few test-taking tips involved here. Not a difficult question, only the context is marbles or apples or things like that. It's a little more contemporary or more useful or real-life situation. Let's look at another question. I also forgot to mention that the question was a no calculator question. So definitely we have to have good algebra skills. Not high algebra, these are basic algebra skills. We need to be able to deal with negative, positive signs. We need to be able to work through the equations quickly to create the equations. There's a lot of emphasis on the ability to create equations. Now here is a question which is a no calculator section question. a free response question, which requires the understanding of a basic. Let's take a look at this one. It says, if x minus 2 is a factor of, once again, I've lost the question, okay? Let me go back to the pen. So x minus 2 is a factor of this expression here, where b is a constant. What is the value of b? So the student needs to be familiar with the concept that if we have a factor x minus 2 of this expression, then if I plug in x equals to 2 into this expression, I can equate this expression to 0. In other words, if I say let f of equal to x squared minus bx plus b, then if this is a factor, then f of 2, that means if instead of x I plug in 2, should get this expression to equate to 0. This is a concept that students have to know. Now, as it is easy, I don't need a calculator to do 2 squares, so I get 4 minus 2b, b equals to 0. So I have 4 minus b equals to 0. Here, this is all simple. The difficulty was just understanding this concept and bringing it to this level. So therefore, b equals to 4, and the answer is 4. Simple, but the difficulty was understanding the concept. Many students don't understand or grasp this concept. I've talked about it in great detail on Test Rocker. Let's move on to another question. Now, this is a calculator question. So now we can use the calculator in this section. However, before I start dealing with this question, there was one thing I forgot to point out. In the note section, the difficulty that we have to know how to solve the question. In the old or current SAT, we were able to plug in numbers, use our calculators, and find answers. We were able to back solve, so plug in the solve. However, now if you do not use calculators, dealing with any numbers becomes quite a tedious task. So we have to know how to solve. We have to have good concept. We have to have good understanding of the concepts. So now, coming to question 3, which is a calculator-based question. That's good news. However, I will point out many students make mistakes in handling the calculator. A good time to start practicing how to handle the calculator, because if you input incorrectly into the calculator, and my favorite phrase is garbage in, garbage out with the calculator. If you information incorrectly, the calculator is going to just follow algorithms and going to come up with some garbage answer. So very careful calculator use is necessary. Now let's talk about this question. Once again, students feel worried when they see charts, but really the information is simple. The question is even more simple. Let's see how. A survey of 170 randomly selected teenagers, so this is the total. So there are 2 ages, 14 to 15 and 16 to 17 age groups, was conducted to gather data on summer employment of teenagers. Now jump to the information. Take a quick look at the information. So these people have a summer job, these people don't have. Make your marks, because have a summer job, do not have a summer job is confusing. Just make a tick mark, yes, no. Now, based on the data, how many times more likely is it for the first group to not? So I'm looking at this section. Do not have a summer job. Round the answer to the nearest 100. So we have to compare how many times is it more likely for a 14 to 15-year-old to not have a summer job than it is for the second group to not have a summer job. So I'm dealing with this column. So how do I compare? Now this is a concept that students have to know. To compare numbers, you can either convert to fractions, but the problem is if the fractions don't have the same denominator, you're in trouble. So the best technique is to convert to percentages. Now here's what I'm going to do. So the 14 to 50, keep working near the chart so you don't have to rewrite. So I have how many percent do not have a summer job? So I'll say 16 divided by 89 times 100. That, and we are allowed to use our calculators. So I get, let me quickly use my calculator. I get 69 over 89 times 100. That gives me 77.52 and so on. And then the second one we have here, that is 42 divided by 81 times 100, and that gives me approximately about 52%. So I'm just rounding off a little bit here. Now I need to find how many times I've lost the question again. So I'm going to quickly recall. Very sensitive. The pen is very sensitive. So in this, I had calculated 77.5%, and in this row, I had calculated approximately 52%. Now, what I need to do is how many times more likely is this group not have a job than this group? So simply divide 77 by 52, and we get 77.5 divided by 52 gives us approximately 1.50 times. That is all I needed to do. The answer choice is C. So what all was involved in solving this question? The question itself is not important. What is important is for us to understand what was it that I needed to have. I needed to have test-taking skills so I could skim through the information, understand the context, and lead to the right columns and the right numbers. I'm just dealing with these two columns here. Then I also needed organizational skills which come with practice, how to organize my working. Finally, I needed to have the understanding that I need to compare. If I need to compare, best thing is to convert to percentages. And the last and final concept that I needed to know is how do I find how many times? Divide the bigger number by the smaller number. That will give you how many times. So it is 1.5 times. So all these concepts will help to solve a question such as this one. Now let's look at another calculator type of question. Let me grab the pen again. Okay, my apologies for the screen disappearing because the pen seems to be very sensitive. Now we have a very, very long kind of a question. Once again, as we read, we must put down information. Boyd grows only tomatoes and raspberries. So tomatoes and raspberries in his garden. Last year, he grew 140 pounds of tomatoes. So 140. I'm making my own data and chart here without actually creating the table. And 60 pounds of raspberries. So organizational skills. This year, the production by weight of tomatoes declined by 20%. So it declined by 20%, so I need 140 times 0.80. Again, conceptual skills. And raspberries declined by 50%, so 60 times 0.50. So the answer here will be, what do I get here if I use my calculator, because I'm allowed to use my calculator. So I have 140 times 0.8 is 112 by weight, and 60 of half of 60 is 30. That doesn't require a calculator. Now let's read on. By what percentage did the total yield by weight of Boyd's garden decline? So I'm looking for percentage decrease. Now that brings me to my understanding and dealing of percentage decrease formula. So I know that percentage decrease equals to the difference between the two quantities. So first of all, we need to find the total quantity here. So here the total quantity equals to 200, and the total quantity here is 112 plus 30. A quick calculation, with or without calculators, is easy, 142. So the difference between the two quantities, so that is in your calculator, you can plug it in directly like this. Use parentheses, 200 take away 142. That's the difference. Close parentheses. Divide the dividing sign divided by my starting point. I don't like to use original number. I like to use starting point. Where am I starting? I was here. Now the decline has come to 142. So my starting point was 200 and you multiply with 100 to get percentage. If you plug this in like that into the calculator, you will get an accurate answer. If you forget the parentheses, as I said, garbage in will yield garbage out. So if I use the calculator in such a manner, then I will get 29%, and we are talking about decrease. So the answer here is A. I definitely needed a guess. So the answer is simple, but concepts. We need to refurbish, to review, to firm up all the gaps in our understanding of concepts. Another, that's a calculator-based question, but I see no reason to be using a calculator here. However, it's seems to be in the calculator section. I personally would have put it in the non-calculator section because it doesn't need a calculator. So here is how I explain this. What is the minimum? Highlight important parts. What is the minimum value of the function graphed on the xy plane above? So I need the minimum value for the range -4 to 6. So I'm looking at the interval -4 to +6, and I'm looking at the minimum value. So at -4, where is the minimum value? -4, the minimum value I can read off is almost 2. So the answer I see, -2, that is the answer. I don't need a calculator for this. I don't know why they put it in the calculator section. You really don't need. So once again, concept. The concept is you need the minimum. It's -infinity. It's finished here, not -infinity. So the range is, the interval we are looking at is -4 to +6. So the graph or the function hasn't reached -infinity. This is the trap choice. So no need for calculator, simple. Understand that I have to look only within this interval. So this is how this question is handled. Oh wow, this looks like a terribly complicated question. But a hint to all the PSAT test takers. Do not freak out. If you see such a difficult question, here's what is going to be the truth. The context is going to be real life scenario, something unfamiliar. Going to be tested is for the idea that, do you understand the context? Can you apply? Can you sift through all this information given to you? As Michael used, he used a really nice word, unwrap. So more unpackaging, more unwrapping is required. And you have to boil it down to, what am I supposed to do? What is the math that I can apply? And I promise you, the math you can apply will be very simple. The context is just hard. So the harder the context, the better the news it is for us students. Let's take a look. So I'm going to focus on this chart first. Here's another test-taking tip. Look at the axes. What do these axes denote? The x-axis talking about some distance, and the y-axis talking about velocity. So this is the speed, this is the distance. Velocity is, of course, different from just normal speed, but because it talks about acceleration, but it's still a type of speed. So ballpark understanding. What is this chart about? This chart is about the velocity-distance relationship among galaxies. Okay, I have no idea what they're talking about. Believe me, even I don't know. Most people don't know what they're talking about. So we are going to just read and figure it out. In 1929, the astronomer Edwin Hubble published the data shown. Okay, the graph plots the velocity of galaxies relative to Earth against distances of galaxies from Earth. So these are the distances from Earth, and these are the velocity of galaxies relative to Earth. Okay, Hubble's data can be modeled by the equation v equals to 500 times d, where v is the velocity in kilometers per second. Units are important. We have to keep an eye on units. Okay, skip a little bit, too much information. Assume that the relationship is valid for larger distances than are shown in the graph. So this is valid for any distances. What is the question? According to Hubble's data, how fast, so I'm talking about speed, so I'm looking at velocity because that's what the chart is telling me. How fast means speed, so velocity. In meters per second, so I'm going to be tricked by this meters per second. The information is in kilometers per second. Is galaxy Q, so a particular galaxy Q, moving away from Earth? So this is in relation to Earth. Here is galaxy Q. This is the spot we are looking at. That's it. So I'm looking at velocity. I'm going to go to the velocity axis, and that is 500. But the velocity equals to 500 kilometers per second, but I need my answer in meters per second. So I'm going to times this with 1,000 meters, make 1 kilometer. So I get velocity equals to 500,000 meters per second. Go to the answers. I don't see any such answer because the answers have been converted to scientific notation. So I quickly have to convert my answer to scientific notation. Once again, a question of knowing how to do that. So concepts. So now this becomes 5 into 10 to the power of 5 because I have 5 zeros here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is the answer, meters per second. So the answer is, of course, B. 5 into 10 to the power of 5 meters per second. So you see, the context was quite difficult, quite unfamiliar, real life context, mature words. However, I just had to unwrap the information to understand, assimilate, and then I also had to assess what is being asked. I need to pay attention to important parts of the question. For example, the units, and I'm talking about galaxy Q, and how fast. So I have to be able to understand fast means speed, and speed has been given as velocity, and the velocity is in kilometers. So make those linkages, then apply the math. The only math I had to apply here was convert kilometers to meters. And then the other part of the math was scientific notation. That's it. Simply done. Now let's move to, we are now with this difficult looking question, we are actually, this is a science-based question. Before I move on, I must point out that this is a science-based question. So the new PSAT will talk a lot about science-based questions in math or in otherwise in reading and writing as well. And other than in math, in the reading, we have history documents, as Michael had pointed out, and there will be an inclusion of foundation documents. So that is going to definitely have mature text. Now here is what College Board is saying. There is no need for abstruse or difficult vocabulary. I disagree. If you are going to include mature text, founding documents, if you're going to include mature writing, contemporary American and world writers, then we better be used to mature vocabulary. It is definitely a very good idea to learn vocabulary. So learn some vocabulary for the coming PSAT, but after that for your real new SAT, do not avoid learning vocabulary. Please do learn vocabulary. The reason I emphasize on this fact is that when you have good vocabulary, you benefit all round. You benefit in understanding the reading passages. You benefit in understanding the writing passages. You assimilate and understand what is written in the passages, of course. You your own writing improves. So now I'm going to pass. I hope you've enjoyed the way I have worked through the questions, of course, and I have shown a lot of test-taking tips. It's important. Students have to de-stress, and one way of de-stressing is knowing how to organize your thoughts knowing how to handle test questions, knowing skills, and of course the most important is knowing the concepts. And that is what I have based and founded the Test Rocker program on, that in my experience of teaching, students improve substantially and they surprise themselves with their math ability, with their reading ability, with their writing ability once they have learned the concepts once again. They've been taught in school, true, but somewhere down the line, some gaps have appeared. And I'm not giving reasons for why a student has not learned. There are hundreds of reasons. But this is the situation today. Can we help it? Can we improve it? Can we alleviate her stress? Of course. And the only way is to learn those concepts now. The students are more mature now. They're able to understand those concepts. So I like to teach those concepts, and that is what I've based Test Rocker on. Test Rocker rocks because it deals with concepts. You can apply them anywhere. You can apply them in real life scenario, in hypothetical scenarios. You can apply them anywhere as long as you know the concepts. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Michael. And before I go, I would like to thank you all for joining this session. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I hope you will join further such webinars that Test Rocker conducts regularly. With that, I'm going to give the mic to Michael.